Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to our home church. Let us prepare our heart toward God and true parents and heaven. Let us sing a song, holy song. 143, O Holy Night. 143, O Holy Night.
Holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till He appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born, oh, night divine, oh, night divine.
Thank you. There is a Christmas carol on parade. 47, angel we have heard on high. 47, angels we have heard on high.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply echo back their joyous strains. In excelsis Deo, Gloria. In excelsis Deo. Shepherds, why this jubilee? Why your joyous strains prolong? Say what may the tidings be, which inspire your heavenly song. Gloria. In excelsis Deo, Gloria. In excelsis Deo. Come to Bethlehem and see, in whose birth the angels sing. Come adore on bended knee, Christ the Lord, the newborn King. Gloria. In excelsis Deo, Gloria. In excelsis Deo.
Thank you. Next song is 110, Joyful, joyful we adore thee. 110, Joyful, joyful we adore thee.
Joyful, joyful. I'm singing the same for
Okay.
sorry. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All thy works with joy surround the earth and heaven reflect thy rays. Stars and angels sing around thee, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowing meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Thou art giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed, wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depth of happy rest. Thou art Father, Christ our brother, all who live in love are thine. Teach us how to love each other, lift us to the joy divine. Mortals join the mighty chorus, which the morning star began. Father, love is waiting for us, brother, love binds man to man. Ever singing, march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music leads us onward in the triumph song of life.
Thank you. It's us about God and true parent. Today is Sunday morning, December 10th, 2017, Holy Calendar, 8th year, October 23rd. It's us about God and true parents. Someday, hello, join me prayer. 사랑에 하시는 하나님 아버지 전부모님, 안녕하십니까? Most precious, most high, most lovely God and true parents, good morning. Last night we had a snowstorm, and now the calm and whole around us is a snow and beautiful the white color above us. We can feel the calm of the heart, and the snowflake the reminding us the beautiful heart of you and love from your happy parents. We are grateful to receive new day we know that scientifically we are different because each cell is every day die and make a new cell coming out. Outside is the same, but we are new person. That means that we have a chance to change, to become the glorified in the kingdom of heaven. We have to walk through the difficulty because surrounding us are many difficulties. We know that right now is the possibility of the war in the world level. We are fighting, and we feel that we have to prepare for this conflict. Every parent, God, you are one. You are harmonious being, and never changing, and unique being with true love. We want to inherit your heart and love through our life, Heavenly Parents. Please guide today. We can improve our relationship with you and true parents and each other in the family and friends and community, so on to the world. Please guide this time to reflect and new determination to make us new and make us qualified your children. Please guide this time that our pastor share his heart and vision through your word. Thank you very much. We sincerely receive and we can act with it, practice it, and we can change the world through centering centering you and centering me to become the unselfish and lovable person. Please bless this time. We sincerely ask you that come to our heart and come to the all friends who are watching this sermon. Thank you very much. Sincerely offer report in the name of Raman and Tamik Montanaro, blessed central family. Aju. Amen.
Aju.
Thank you. Please sit it and welcome our pastor Montanaro.
Good morning, everybody. In praying to start today's sermon, to prepare for today's sermon, I had several inspirations, and I'm going to try to tie them together. We're going to start by reading Father's autobiography from his early childhood, just as one short chapter, and then I want to share about some videos that I watched with my family over the week, and I want to conclude by talking about pain and passion, which might be the title of our sermon. I haven't decided yet. So, one thing I'd like to say is this, that I've been struggling with the word sermon. I don't like even the word Sunday service, because service implies serving God. And there's nothing wrong with serving God, but I think our relationship is actually much deeper. I think we're God's children. And while it's important to serve our parents, the concept of serve, the word serve, can be misconstrued to mean that we're in a servant's position. And so many people feel that they're servants of God and that they should obey God's commandments and that that's the right way to unite with God or to attend God. But I would like to go beyond that and realize that we're not God's servants, we're God's children. And while children, I think, do well to serve their parents, more importantly than serving is the Korean word moshida, which means to attend. And there's no real translation for it. The word attend has some value in this context. But when you say to attend, it has many meanings in English also. Like you attend a concert or you attend a performance. So you show up. So attend can mean just show up. But attending to something or tending to something, meaning to take care of something, is more the meaning I'm looking for here. And that's our relationship with God, is that we should be taking care of God. Now you may think that's strange, that anyone can take care of God. But if you think about our responsibility, we don't have the responsibility. God has already taken care of us. God has taken care of us, and it will continue to take care of us. But God, what does God need? God needs children who really understand His heart and want to see His will accomplished on earth. That's why Jesus asked us to pray, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. So, God's will can only be done when God's children unite with God and unite with God's will. So, it's important that you understand, and that I understand, that the only way to accomplish God's will is to become God's children. That is God's will, that His fallen children come back home, that we return to God. And that doesn't mean going someplace else or dying. It means right here on earth, living with God. Everything we do, when we eat, we should eat with God. When we celebrate, we should celebrate with God. When we make love, we should make love with God. When we sleep, we should sleep with God. Whatever we do should be done with God. Without God, how can we live the right way? And what is our relationship with God? Are we servants? Then, yeah, we would serve God. That's the right way to live with God. But we're not servants. Our fundamental nature was given by God as God's children. We're creative, we have free will, and we have responsibility. And that makes us very different from the animals, and from the plants, and from the minerals, which follow the program that God invested in them at their creation. So plants follow the program to be the plant they are. Animals follow the program to be the animal that they are. Minerals follow the program to be the mineral that they are. Atoms follow the program to be the atom that they are. The elements maintain their identity because God gave them an identity. And they obey that identity. They unite with it absolutely. But we're not programmed by God that way. We have within us a program that says this is the right thing. Our conscience is always acting inside of us. That's the connection we have to the original mind that God gave us. But our conscience is not going to control us. We can override our conscience. We can override our original mind. Right? We don't have to obey our conscience. So, what is all this about? Even the word Sunday service to me comes from an era when Christians believed that they were servants of God, God's servants. What would sons and daughters do with their parent? What would you call that ceremony? I'm open to your suggestions. You can type it in the comments column if you like. What should we call a ceremony where children gather together with their parents? Maybe a family meeting? A gathering? A Sunday gathering? I like that. A Sunday gathering, a Sunday meeting. I've been calling it also sometimes on YouTube when I type in my comments, a journey. We're taking a journey with God. So there's a message sometimes I talk about. But it's hard because none of these words have the idea of a ceremony like Sunday service is, and that we gather together at a certain time. Maybe a gathering is the best word.
For the Korean language, anshi Father told us.
Anshil, settlement. But that's the idea of what we do in our lives, not so much the ceremony of Sunday service. So anyway, we'll think about that. And then in addition to the idea of Sunday service, the idea of sermon is the idea of somebody giving a very well organized kind of lecture on theology and on doctrine and on inspiration. You know, the idea of homiletics is the study of how to give a good sermon. And at seminary you study something called homiletics, which how do you give a good sermon. But the idea that a sermon is something I prepare allows you as the audience to sort of be an audience. But I believe that God, I'm talking to God right now. This minute, God is in me and I can feel God in me and God's in you. And actually I can feel God in you as well. So the God that is in all of us wants us to experience something. And He's using me as an instrument somehow to bring us together and experience something together and to grow together. But I don't feel like it's a sermon. I want it to be more spontaneous, more alive than that. I want God to feel free to step in and change my mind about what I want to talk about. Then it's more interesting for you as well as the audience. Because you realize that this is a living thing. A sermon should be a living thing. Right? It shouldn't be like I wrote it out and I'm just reading it to you. And many pastors in the 1600s and the 1700s and the 1800s, even today, they write out their sermon beforehand and they practice it. And then they read from a text. And they may have some inspirations that they share, but basically they're reading the sermon. And you can read, there are books of sermons. So you can go into seminary, you can get books of sermons that were given that were just transcriptions, but most of the time they're actually the copy of the pastor. So again, I just want us to go beyond that. And I want you to realize that I struggle with this point about what to call this gathering and this message. So I'm open to your suggestions. Let's open up Father's autobiography to page 23. To the chapter entitled, Stubborn Child Who Never Gives Up. Stubborn Child Who Never Gives Up. We're not going to read the whole chapter, but we'll read the first half. My father, this is from Reverend Moon's autobiography. This is talking about his early years, growing up as a child in what is now closed in by the communist state of North Korea. But when he was born in 1920, it was all one Korea under Japanese occupation. My father was not good at collecting debts, but if he borrowed money, he would honor the pledge to repay, even if it meant selling the family cow or even removing one of the pillars from our home and selling it at the market. He always said, "You can't change the truth with trickery. Anything that is true will not be dominated by a small trick. Anything that is the result of trickery won't go more than a few years before it is exposed." So that's a good lesson right there about our lives, right? Not to live your life as a lie. Not to try to trick people. In business, in love, in relationships, in academics. Don't try to pull one over on people. Be honest. My father was large in stature. He was so strong that he had no difficulty walking up a flight of stairs carrying a bag of rice on his shoulders. I think the stairs that Father's referring to is more like a ladder that they would have going up to a loft. And it's probably like a 40 kilogram, 88 pound sack of rice. So he could put it on his shoulder and just climb up, right up the stairs. The fact that at age 90, I'm still able to travel around the world and carry on my work is a result of the physical strength I inherited from my father. My mother, whose favorite Christian hymn was Higher Ground, was also quite a strong woman. You know the song Higher Ground? We sing it sometimes. Yeah. I'm walking on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I'm onward bound, my prayer, my aim is higher ground. Like that. So she was also a strong woman. I take after her, not only for her wide forehead and round face, but for her straightforward and high-spirited personality. I have a stubborn streak, and there's no doubt I am my mother's child. When I was a child, I had the nickname All-Day Crier. I earned this nickname because once I started to cry, I wouldn't stop for the entire day. When I cried, it would be so loud that people would think something terrible had happened. People sleeping in bed would come outside to see what was going on. Also, I didn't just cry sitting still. I would jump around the room, accidentally injuring myself, even bleeding, and creating an uproar. I had this kind of intense personality even when I was young. Once my mind was made up, I would never back down, not even if it meant breaking a bone in my body. Of course, this was all before I became mature. When my mother would scold me for doing something wrong, I would talk back to her, saying, "No, absolutely not." All I had to do was say I was wrong, but I would rather have died than let those words out of my mouth. Really stubborn. My mother, though, had quite a strong personality as well. She would strike me and say, "You think you can get away with not answering your parent?" Once, she struck me so hard I was knocked down. Even after I got up, I wouldn't give in to her. She just stood in front of me crying loudly. Even then, I wouldn't say I was wrong. Please, children, don't follow this circuit. My competitive spirit, well, I guess it's okay if you do it for the right reason, I guess. My competitive spirit was as strong as my stubbornness. I couldn't stand to lose in any situation. The adults in the village would say, "Osan's," Osan was the district that Father lived in. "Osan's little tiny eyes." Once he decides to do something, he does it. They call Father Little Tiny Eyes. Probably, because Father's eyes are very small, and he says he can see long distance because his eyes are small. I don't remember how old I was when this happened. A boy gave me a bloody nose and ran away. For a month after that, I would go to his house every day and stand there, waiting for him to come out. The village adults were amazed to see me persist until finally his parents apologized to me. They even gave me a container full of rice cakes. This doesn't mean I was always trying to win with stubborn persistence. I also was physically much larger and stronger than other children my age. No child could beat me in arm wrestling. I once lost a wrestling match to a boy 3 years older than I was, and it made me so angry that I couldn't sit still. I went to a nearby mountain, stripped some bark from an acacia tree, and for the next 6 months I worked out on this tree every evening to become strong enough to defeat that child. At the end of 6 months, I challenged him to a rematch, and I managed to beat him. Each generation in our family has had many children. I had one older brother, 3 older sisters, and 3 younger sisters. I actually had 4 other siblings who were born after Hyo-sun, the youngest sister, but they died at an early age. All in all, my mother gave birth to 13 children, but 5 did not survive. Her heart must have been deeply tormented. Mother suffered a great deal to raise so many children in circumstances that were far from plentiful. As a child, I had many siblings. If these siblings got together with our first and second cousins, we could do anything, like a huge gang. Much time has passed, however, and now I feel as though I am the only one remaining in the world. I once visited North Korea for a short while in 1991, and in the end of this autobiography, Father talks about that visit where finally he was able to break down the resistance of North Korea to let him come and meet Kim Il-sung. And actually they spent the day together, and Kim Il-sung really surrendered artistically to Father and agreed to try to unite North and South Korea and opened up North Korea to economic development. And Father was welcome there any time, he said. And this is to the number one anti-communist in the world. Kim Il-sung was that opened by Father's heart. During that visit, he was able to visit his hometown for the first time in 50 years. I once visited North Korea for a short while in 1991. I went to my hometown for the first time in 48 years and found that my mother and most of my siblings had passed away. Only one older sister and one younger sister remained. My older sister, who had been like a mother to me when I was a child, had become a grandmother of more than 70 years. My younger sister was older than 60, and her face was covered with wrinkles. When we were young, I teased my younger sister a lot. I would shout, "Hey, your son, you're going to marry a guy with one eye." And she would come back with, "What did you say? What makes you think you know that, brother?" Then she would run up behind me and tap me on the back with her tiny fists. This is when she was little. In the year she turned 18, Hyo-sun met a man with whom one of our aunts was trying to arrange her marriage. That morning she got up early, carefully combed her hair, and powdered her face. She thoroughly cleaned our home, inside and out, and waited for her prospective groom to arrive. "Hyo-sun," I teased her, "you must really want to get married." This made her blush, and I still remember how beautiful she looked, with the redness in her face showing through the white powder. It has been almost 20 years since my visit to North Korea. My older sister, who wept so sorrowfully to see me, has since passed away, leaving just my younger sister. It fills me with such anguish. I feel as though my heart may melt away. We'll stop there. So you can read this yourself. Very beautiful story of Father's life. Looking at his story, I think about the pain that Father felt. He was raised in a loving family, though. He didn't experience divorce like I experienced, or some of the breakdowns that maybe many of you have experienced. The divorce rate in America is so high that half of us have experienced divorce, and probably all of us have experienced divorce either by ourselves or vicariously through a friend or a family member or a brother or sister that's divorced. We've all seen and been through divorce and family breakdown. We've seen people come back from Vietnam addicted to heroin and becoming, we didn't have the name PTSD in those days, but basically all the Vietnam vets were struggling with post-traumatic stress syndrome disorder, and many of them are the homeless people that we saw in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, because they just couldn't find anywhere to feel home. So there's been a lot of suffering in America, and we've seen it. Some people may have been privileged to grow up in a family where there was no breakdown. Some of my friends I know had that kind of experience. And I hope that all of you did. I don't wish pain on anybody. But I think that pain causes you to become more passionate about your life. I think pain and passion are connected. That's why I wanted to name this sermon Pain and Passion. Because I think when you experience pain, you have a passionate heart to try to change the world after that. Father's pain came from his nation. As he goes on to say in his autobiography, he saw the pain of his nation under Japanese occupation, being tortured and enslaved by the Japanese. Girls were taken away from their homes to serve as comfort women in the Japanese army. At 13, 14 years old, 15-year-old girls were taken away from their villages and made to have sex with hundreds of men every day as comfort women in the Japanese military. Many of them tried to kill themselves, or they would be stopped from killing themselves. They weren't allowed to, but some of them would find a way to kill themselves. This kind of suffering was going on when Father was a young man. And he saw this suffering. Also, young Korean men were conscripted by force into the Japanese army, and they were on the front lines of World War II. The front lines, the ones who were first shot and killed in many battles, were actually Korean young men that were forced to serve in the military because they were under Japanese occupation. And Korea itself was suffering so much. Father's family converted to Christianity when he was 9 or 10 years old. He says 10, but by Korean counting, that would mean he was 9 by our counting, in probably 1929. And that was the height of the Japanese persecution of Christians. They really hated the Christians because the good Christians refused to bow down to the emperor, which is part of Shinto worship, is bowing down to the emperor. So the Japanese were imposing their religion and language and culture on Korea. But many Koreans were resisting and were being killed and tortured because of that. One church was barred shut with all the people inside and burned to the ground. And people could hear the screaming of people inside as the heat got so intense and they were being killed. These kinds of experiences were shaping Father's childhood. So he was filled with pain and therefore also passion. And I don't wish pain on any of you. As any good parent, you want to make sure your children don't experience pain in a certain way, right? But actually we know that if you experience pain, it fuels your passion for living. And that's a good thing. My father was very passionate. Anyone knows my dad, Tony Montanaro, knows that he was very passionate about teaching and performing pantomime and the arts. And his childhood was not easy. He growing up as a first generation born in the United States Italian immigrant during the Depression. So he had suffered a lot of pain as a young person. And that fueled his passion. And that made him a great performer. So your pain can fuel your passion. So I would say that as a lesson from today's sermon is please let your pain fuel your passion. I want to talk about 3 videos that we saw as a family. And I'll put the links for them when I post this to YouTube and to my website. In the descriptive box under YouTube, I'll put the links for these 3 videos. Anyway, you can find them. They're on YouTube. They're the commencement addresses that various celebrities gave at various universities. And they're very inspiring, and I want to just talk about that for just a moment. The first one I want to talk about is Denzel Washington. I think it was Dillard University, I'm not sure, but he spoke, and it's an edited speech, so it's only 8 minutes long. Maybe you can find the whole speech. And he starts out by saying, in his commencement address, he says, put God first. He says, he gives many other points. There are 3 points I think he made during his speech. But his first point, and he really emphasized it very strongly, he said, put God first. He says, it doesn't matter what you do with your life, but God has to be the first and the center of everything you do. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to the grace of God, he says. And it's very sobering to realize this very famous man who's won 2 Academy Awards, who's considered one of the greatest actors of our generation, is that humble before God. And I think it's really valuable to watch his speech. And he also talks about pain and suffering as the fuel for his passion. but he always talks about put God first. The second speech, not from a Christian perspective this time, but actually from a yogic perspective, the idea of yoga and the Ayurvedic, the Indian tradition, was Jim Carrey, who did Bruce Almighty and Liar Liar and other films that you all know. He spoke at a university I didn't even know existed. It's called Maharishi University of Management, MUM, M-U-M, and it's in Fairfield, Iowa. And it was started by the Transcendental Meditation Group to make a university centering on transcendental meditation. And apparently Jim Carrey has been doing this for 25 years, his own transcendental meditation. He's been meditating for 25 years. And so he was, I guess, invited to come and speak for that reason. Or maybe he volunteered, I don't know. And it's a very powerful speech, actually, 26 minute long. And I highly recommend it. And he speaks about trusting the universe. You know, he doesn't use the word God. He talks about the universe. He's talking about trusting the universe, that all that you need is already waiting for you. All that you believe you should become, you already are. And you should try to dance with this and be free and open yourself up. He's speaking to, of course, graduates of the university. And he's saying, it took me years to find out who I was. And, you know, all the ego trappings of fame and success. He says, I wish everyone could experience that right away so that they would realize how empty it is. And they could realize that they need to find something inside. So, I mean, it's a very deep speech from a different perspective than Denzel Washington's. But again, teaching graduates, please don't focus on just making money, as if that, or your resume, or that kind of thing, as if that's the center of your life. The center of your life is something very different. Then the third, so you can look to just put those in YouTube search engine, you'll find them, but I'll put the link. The third one was J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter. It's her speech at Harvard University in 2008. And she had become famous by this point, and she was becoming very rich by this point. And she tells the story of her life. And she's not a performer like Jim Carrey or Denzel Washington. So for her, it was terrifying, especially to go up in front of Harvard University, right? The #1 university in the United States by many counts, and speak in front of all these educated, intelligent people about whatever. And she said she wanted to thank Harvard University. She started by saying that the 2 weeks of nausea and anxiety that I've experienced has caused me to lose 14 pounds. So I feel great. She says it's a win-win, because she was so scared to get up and speak in front of everybody. But she really gives a beautiful story, and many who know her story know that she was divorced, she was a single mother, and she had to raise that child by herself. What they don't know is that at university, she tells a story that at university, her parents wanted her to do something practical, go in vocational kind of field. And she basically lied to them, and as soon as they left, she changed her major to the classics. And she began studying Greek classics and literature. And you can see it in her writing, how it informs. She at the beginning of the 7th novel of Harry Potter, she does a quote, I think from Seneca, or from one of the Greek or Roman poets, the Aeschylus maybe, the suffering of the race, the wounding of the heart, and some kind of thing like this she talks about. So she studied for 4 years the classics, and what her parents was afraid of absolutely came true. She couldn't get a job, of course, and so she's working for 8 years. But the key thing of the speech, and I think the reason why she became so successful with writing Harry Potter later, is she served for several years as a researcher at Amnesty International in London. Now, Jim Carrey's speech came from the Ayurvedic yogic perspective, Denzel Washington's from the Christian perspective. I would say that because especially of the classics and her love for Greek literature and Greek culture, J.K. Rowling comes from a humanistic perspective, maybe a Hellenistic perspective, but a humanism more, enlightenment kind of thing. But she served at Amnesty International for several years as a researcher and taking from letters and phone calls and visits and interviews with torture victims and people who were suffering and waiting for loved ones to reappear after they disappeared because of various regimes had kidnapped their parents or something like that. So she was watching and trying to take care of these people. And she doesn't burst into tears in her speech or anything like that, but you can tell that those years were very formative for her. That she experienced suffering beyond what she herself had experienced. And it made her realize that her suffering was very small compared to the suffering of people whose whole family has been kidnapped, tortured, and killed in Africa, say. And she became humbled by that. And she also says something about human beings, like what I said earlier, that we're different from animals and plants and things. She says, human beings have a unique capacity to empathize with others' suffering and to use their imagination to understand what somebody else went through. And we don't have to go through it by experience. We don't have to learn by experience, she said. You know, that's what makes human beings unique, she said. And so she grew from that experience. And I think she says herself that it informed her writing of Harry Potter. I don't know exactly how, but I also think that maybe God allowed her to become so wealthy because he knew that she would give all her money away, which she has done. She has really given away all her money to I think mostly Amnesty International, I would guess. I would have to check online. You could do the research yourself, but I'm sure she's given huge amounts to Amnesty International. And I think she's an unselfish person in that sense. So her pain and the pain she experienced through empathy allowed her to have passion. So I would like to recommend, in other words, first of all, that you watch those videos online. They're very good. And they will help you to become more open to possibilities and to changing what you're doing in your life and maybe to become more unselfish. I would like you to think about pain and passion. I myself have been through a lot of pain. My parents divorced when I was 5.5 years old, and I couldn't even look at that emotional difficulty for like 10, 15 years until I was a young adult. And then I began looking at that and going through the healing, the pain of that, you know. It made me very passionate. I was a very passionate person when I was younger. I still am, I think you can tell. But I was never asked to be a leader because I think I was so passionate, and not just about life and helping others and that kind of thing, but about love and many things, that for me, I couldn't control my passion. Self-control, and that's another thing Denzel Washington talks about. He says, you must apply discipline and consistency if you want to succeed. Put God first, he says, and then apply discipline, have goals. Having dreams without goals is not useful, he said. You have to have goals, actual goals that you want to accomplish. And he quoted his mother saying, you could run in place all day long and you're not going to get anywhere. So don't, and he says, I love this line, he said, don't confuse movement with progress. And don't confuse passion, I would add, with effective living. Just because you're passionate doesn't mean you're necessarily applying that effectively to do something good and useful in your life. And I think that kind of self-control and self-discipline I've been learning and trying to learn myself. And hopefully I have it now enough that I can apply my passion for this mission of doing home church and reaching out to you and reaching out to the world and becoming a helpful force in the growth of America and the growth and the helping this world, which is my dream. So I would say to you, let your pain and passion also become empathy and compassion. Compassion means to feel with, right? Passion is intense feeling, right? We sang about Jesus this morning, and Jesus, in the Catholic Church, the passion of Christ is the last few hours of his life, and actually during his crucifixion, where he's suffering the most intensely. And the Stations of the Cross in the Catholic Church are held up, and you can go around and see statues commemorating or paintings commemorating the various stages of the last few hours of Jesus' life, where he was tortured, he was whipped, he's carrying the cross. Simon the Cyrene carries the cross for him. When he stumbles, he's nailed to the cross. He's crucified. He's fed vinegar. He's stabbed in the side by a spear. All of these horrible things that he went through is called the Passion of Christ. So compassion is to feel that pain or suffering with someone else, that intensity of emotion. So I would like your pain and passion to not be selfish. See, being selfishly, my pain and my passion, it won't help anybody. But when you turn your pain into empathy, which is feeling for others, and your passion to compassion, to feel the suffering of others and to feel your heart go out to others, then you can really become truly effective in your life at helping other people and doing something for the world. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, and I hope that it helps you to become a more serious person. Discipline yourself. Don't be self-centered. Don't cry for yourself and feel your own pain. Feel that pain, but then go from that to feeling the pain of others, empathizing with others, feeling others' pain. And use that power that comes from passion to help the world. And finally I would say this, if you have not experienced pain, and if you are not someone who has empathy or compassion or passion, then maybe it's time to begin to look at the world and go out to the world and begin to experience other people's suffering and take care of other people. Because the greatest value you have in your life comes from what you give to others. Actually, going back to Denzel Washington's speech, he says something quite similar to that in his speech. He says, let's see if I can remember exactly, he said, giving or being is the most selfish thing you can do. Because the joy that I experience of giving to others is so great that I cannot count it almost as if I'm doing anything for other people. It's like I'm doing it for myself. So he's almost, it's kind of cute to say that giving to others is selfish. But that's kind of a heavenly giving. Because the joy we experience when we can give to others, coming from our deep compassion, is greater than any joy you'll experience by being wealthy or famous or being powerful or being very smart and knowledgeable and smarter than other people. So please, live your life with empathy and compassion for the sake of others. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for filling my life with passion, with empathy and compassion and understanding of others, and for helping me live through the pain that I've experienced in my life. And I hope that for the people that are listening who have gone through their own difficulties and pain, then I hope you can help them, Father, to find empathy and compassion, the power to love others from their own pain. I thank you so much for the examples that others have set, for famous people who've also gone through suffering, and maybe their greatness lies in the amount they've suffered as people. I pray that we can have vision and hope and never doubt how great we can become, never doubt how much we can do for the world, because the only limit is how much I can give. And I pray that I can give all of myself, Father, for the rest of my life, for the sake of the world. I thank you so much for my family, for my wife and my children, for all the brothers and sisters listening at home. I thank you and offer this day to you, and offer this prayer in the name of Raman and Tamiko Montanaro. 축복 중심 가정 라만과 타미코 몬타나로 이름으로 보고드립니다. I offer this in the name of Raman and Tamiko Montanaro, a blessed central family. Aju. Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.